NBA 2K25 has released its ratings for players on the upcoming game coming out in September. But guess what? I know a lot of y'all don't play games and things like that. It's cool because we're going to talk real Grizzlies basketball scenarios, and we're going to bring those ratings into that conversation. So stay tuned for all that coming up here on Locked On Grizzlies.
You are Locked On Grizzlies, your daily Memphis Grizzlies podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, everyone? Happy Friday and welcome back to Locked On Grizzlies. I am your host today, Damichael Cole, beat writer for the Commercial Appeal right here in Memphis, Tennessee. Going solo today without my co-host, Joe Mullinax. But thank you guys for still tuning in with me on today. This show is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. Remember that now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can get $5. All you got to do is bet $5 and you get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Just visit FanDuel.com/locked on to get started with that opportunity. And speaking of getting started with Locked On, if you're new to Locked On Podcast Network or Locked On Grizzlies, you can get started everywhere. We're available on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you watch, wherever you listen. Locked On Grizzlies is there and available. So make sure you stay tuned and continue to tune in with us on that. And shout out to the everydayers out there that continue to like, rate, comment, subscribe to all things Locked On Grizzlies. Now getting into today's show, we're going to talk some 2K ratings a little bit. And I know, again, we got our gamers out there. Shout out to the gamers. Shout out to 2K players. I'm the best. You can't beat me. So if you want to play me, just let me know and, we can make that happen. But to the people who don't play the games like NBA 2K and whatnot, stick with us throughout this show because we're going to mention the ratings and we're kind of going to mention them as a reference point throughout the show. But I also want to talk about some real deep dive subjects on the Grizzlies for this upcoming season. And in our first segment, it's going to be centered around rating the Grizzlies' big three. And you know what? Let's use the 2K ratings as a reference point for this idea. First and foremost, we talked about it in the last episode a little bit. Joe Mullinax and myself mentioned it with Desmond Bane, but NBA 2K releases its top 100 players ratings on the game. So you could expect that 3 Grizzlies were included on that list. One, Marcus Smart, I think, last year around this time when we were looking at ratings lists and whatnot, Marcus Smart was firmly in that 80s to 90s range of top 100 players. 2K did not have him in the top 100. So with that being said, it's just the big 3. It's Jaren Jackson Jr., Desmond Bane, and Ja Morant. And the first guy who came in on that list was none other than Desmond Bane. And quite frankly, Desmond Bane was the only one whose positioning that I really had problems with figuring out why was he so low. Ja Morant's, I understand it a little bit. And Jaren Jackson Jr., I'll get to him in a second. I understand it a little bit. But Desmond Bane was rated by NBA 2K's top 100 players. He was rated 68th on the game. I'll give you a reference point to that. His overall is 83 overall for the game players. You know pretty much what that number means. But if you're not a game player, let's put it in perspective for you. Josh Hart, solid role player, but a role player at that for the New York Knicks, who's never going to be an all-star more than likely, but he's a very fundamental piece to good winning teams, but not an all-star. Desmond Bane has all-star potential. Josh Hart was an 82 overall rating. DeAndre Ayton, who was traded from the Phoenix Suns, basically because he couldn't fit there anymore, is an 83 overall and the 69th ranked player. And then there's Desmond Bane. So that's who Desmond Bane is kind of grouped with. But if you take it another level for there's some more respectful names in there. You got Michael Porter Jr. in there. But then Kyle Kuzma. I think Desmond Bane is levels above Kuz. But what do I know? Draymond Green, Tyler Hero, Zach LaVine, Miles Turner is above him. Aaron Gordon, another very good role player for that Denver Nuggets team. These Denver Nugget role players are getting some little boost in this game. But then if you go to players rated between 60 and 51, I still think there are players that Desmond Bane's better than. I mean, CJ McCollum over Desmond Bane in the year of 2024? I think not. Jared Allen, okay. Whatever. James Harden. I like James Harden. Like the playmaking ability. Like he's transformed this game or whatever. Fred VanVleet. Champ. But over Desmond Bane? Uh, OG Anunoby. Mikal Bridges. Chris Middleton. Bradley Beal. Bradley Beal, okay. Yeah. And Rudy Gobert as well. But that's just some of the names. I mean, I could keep going on and on. I know many of you don't want me to just keep rattling off names, but just to throw out a few out there. When you get the 50 to 41, it's a little bit more respectable. You know, you got guys like Alperen Sengun, Brandon Ingram, Julius Randle, Scotty Barnes, DeJounte Murray. That's the group I think that Desmond Bane should be in. So that leads me to the idea of thinking if Desmond Bane should be in that group where the players are ranked 50th through the 41 through 50 on 2K's rates, he's a top 50 player in the NBA. Now, 2K ratings are not overall like they don't directly translate. I will say that. You know, there are certain things in 2K that make players look good. We'll get to that later, like with Ja Morant. He's like a cheat code in a game like 2K. Giannis Antetokounmpo, they're like cheat codes. You know, you could just press the down button and then hit square or hit X, or depending on what game system you play, and they're gonna dunk all over everybody. Like there are certain guys who are just cheat codes, whatever the case may be. And with that being said, I still don't understand why Desmond Bane is rated that low. But I get it because when you talk about Ja Morant, Jaren Jackson Jr., and Desmond Bane, the one guy who's going to kind of be the most unheralded on a national scale is Desmond Bane. But you know what? We saw Desmond Bane up close last year. It wasn't a lot of games, but we saw him throw up 25 points, 5 rebounds, 5 assists pretty much. And he's consistently done that for the most part over the past 2 seasons. And I can't emphasize it enough because people will say, oh, well, you know, he did most of that while Ja was out. Desmond Bane's numbers were better when Ja Morant was on the floor. When Ja Morant played, he averaged more points. He averaged more rebounds. And Dez averaged more assists. Yeah. When Ja Morant, the Grizzlies point guard, was on the floor, Dez still averaged more assists than he did without Ja on the floor. So take that. As our guy David Fizdale used to say, take that for data. You know? So moving on, I think Jaren Jackson Jr. pretty much and you know, Ja, I don't think there's anything to complain about where those guys end up in the rankings on 2K's ratings. Jaren Jackson Jr., shout out to Jaren. He's rated 39th. You know, some people feel like it's kind of low. I feel like it's a fair number. Let's give you the reference point. I mean, for one, he's ahead of Lauri Markkanen, who I think is really terrific. So Lauri Markkanen is 40th. But here are some of the players that are directly in front of Jaren Jackson Jr. You got Jamal Murray, Kristaps Porzingis, Chet Holmgren, DeMar DeRozan, Jrue Holiday, LaMelo Ball, Karl Anthony Towns, Pascal Siakam. I think that's good territory. I think that's a good group. You got a few champions in there. You got some all-stars in there as well. You got multi-time all-stars. It's a good group for Jaren. And quite frankly, this is probably a little lower than you wanted Jaren to be, like after the way he, you know, made an all-star game, defensive player of the year. Like you wanted to see him build on it from that perspective. But I mean, it's a game. And quite frankly, I think there are areas in Jaren Jackson Jr.'s game where he can continue to expand and be that player who's going to be a 90 overall in 2K at some point and be one of those unstoppable forces. It starts with his shooting accuracy from three-point range. Everyone knows Jaren Jackson Jr. can shoot the basketball. He has those games where he makes 5-6 3-pointers. But Jaren is one of the biggest keys, and you can say this for 6 or 7 dudes on the Grizzlies. That's one of the things that makes them stand out. But there are certain skill sets within those players that make them stand out as to why they are going to be key cogs in determining the Grizzlies' success this season. For Jaren Jackson Jr., you know what you're going to get defensively. You know what you're going to get just from an overall offensive forceful standpoint. Jaren Jackson Jr.'s three-point efficiency means everything to me this year. And when I say that, I mean that if he is an efficient three-point shooter, top 4, top 3, top 2, maybe even top 1 in the West. If he's the 32, 33%, 6-7 shot attempts per game, which is where he's kind of been, in recent years. And we'll see how things play out. I mean, the Grizzlies still they've won 50 wins twice. They've won over 50 games twice with him being that type of player. So that's very possible as well. But I just think if you want this team to go to the next level, between Ja, between Jaren, between Marcus Smart, one or possibly two of them have to shoot over 35% from three-point range. None of them historically have consistently done that. Ja hasn't. Marcus hasn't. Jaren hasn't. Desmond Bane, close your eyes. It's happening. He's going to shoot over 35% from three-point range. I mean, he probably could do it with his offhand. I mean, Desmond Bane is one of the most accurate shooters in the NBA. But he's going to need some help because you're probably going to start Zach Edey at the 5. You're probably not going to do the whole 5-out thing, that we talked about a little bit. But with all that being said, you're going to need another guy in that starting lineup. Got guys off the bench, Luke Kennard, Vince Williams, Santi Aldama. I trust that those guys can knock down three-pointers. I trust that Jaren can knock them down as well. But the question is, at what accuracy? Because Jaren's going to get them up. He can miss 3 or 4. It's still going up now. Don't get it twisted. He will not shy away unless he's just dominating in the paint or something like that. But it's all about the accuracy. If Jaren is over 35%, mark my words, Jaren's over 35% from three-point range, the league's in trouble. The league's in trouble. But that's neither here nor there. We'll get to that later on as we talk about the season and things going on. But right now in today's show, before we get to our next segment here, we got to remember that when it comes to 2K, these are just ratings, and it's not real life. So remember that. But coming up in the next segment of Locked On Grizzlies, we're going to talk about another area of 2K, more on the specialty ratings, and one Grizzly in particular that we haven't talked about this season very much this offseason, and that's Marcus Smart. So I want you to stay tuned for that coming up here next on Locked On Grizzlies. But before we get to that, remember that today's episode of Locked On Grizzlies is brought to you by FanDuel. Because look, you've heard us talk a lot about FanDuel, and that's mainly because it is America's #1 sports book. Well, we have something a little different for you. And look, it is, to me, one of the best offers out there. Shout out to the football fans, because this is one of the best offers you are going to get to watch your favorite NFL team. Now, through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5. All you got to do is bet a little pretty $5. And you get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. I don't know about you, but I'm a Green Bay Packers fan, and our first couple games of the season are big-time games. So I want to go see those first 3 games, and I need that 3-week free trial through FanDuel, and all I got to do is bet $5 to get it. We're going to make that happen. But then with a YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out of market game. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel at any time. It's that simple. So just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon right now to download America's #1 sportsbook. That's all you got to do. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and go download America's #1 sportsbook. Take advantage of one of the best opportunities you're going to find out there via the Locked On Grizzlies Network. Coming up here next on Locked On Grizzlies, we're going to talk Marcus Smart, so make sure you stay tuned for that here coming up next on Locked On Grizzlies. Welcome back to Locked On Grizzlies, everyone. I'm Damichael Cole, beat writer for the Commercial Appeal here in Memphis, Tennessee. And we got to talk Marcus Smart because we haven't talked about the guy a lot this offseason. And, I get it. Some people are kind of leaning into that whole Vince Williams or G.G. Jackson possibly as the 5th starter. And, and Marcus Smart came here. He spent a lot of time hurt. Marcus Smart still can ball now. Don't get it misconstrued. And 2K still thinks he can ball too. They didn't have him in their top 100 ratings or, for the top 100 players. He was not in those ratings. He also wasn't included in the top 5 perimeter defenders. You had Drew Holiday, Alex Caruso, Herb Jones, Jalen Suggs, Derek White. So when I saw those things, I'm like, man, Marcus Smart, might be flying under the radar a little bit. And then I seen his name on a list, and it led me to believe something else that we're going to talk about. Again, we're going to use the rating to kind of frame this conversation. But Marcus Smart was included on the top 5 steals ratings on 2K. Number 1 was Matisse Thybulle. That's, he's really good at that. That's the strength of his game. Number 2 was Alex Caruso. But number 3 was Marcus Smart, right ahead of, Dyson Daniels, DeLon Wright, former Grizzlies player, with a 96 overall steal rating on the game of 2K. You know what that says to me? Marcus Smart has some of the best hands in the NBA. We already knew that, but it should be kind of a confirmation thing for the Grizzlies fans who are saying, do I really want Marcus Smart in this starting lineup? Let me tell you why it works. Because with this guy's hands, with his ability to create steals, some of you may not remember, before Marcus Smart got hurt, do you know he was pacing the league in steals per games? Marcus Smart was on a tear to start. The Grizzlies were struggling, and it wasn't pretty. We talked about the 0-6 and all that. Marcus Smart was averaging 2.1 steals per game. 2.1 steals per game in the 20 games that he played. That would have been a career high for him. But it's not like up to his career at this point, he hasn't been a guy who gets a lot of steals. Here, Marcus Smart steals number year by year for you. 1.5, 1.5, 1.6, 1.3 mixed in there. But outside of that, 1.8, 1.7, 1.5, 1.7, 1.5, and then 2.1 with the Grizzlies. 10 seasons. Only one season has he had less than 1.5 steals per game. And in that year, he had 1.3. Marcus Smart is going to wreak havoc. It's the name of his game. He's a good one-on-one defender and all that. Like you're not just going to cook him. But Marcus Smart's name of the game is disruptive. And when you think about the Grizzlies defense, you think about Taylor Jenkins. I use that one H word a lot, havoc. Talk about the Grizzlies defense over the course of the years, wreaking havoc. Go back to 2 years ago, 56-win team. Why did they stand out so much? What made that team what they became? They were number 1 in the league in stocks, the steals, the blocks. They were terrific at it. They were near the top of the league in both. And those 2 categories led to the Grizzlies having the top transition scoring offense in the NBA, because not only could they get rebounds, which they were also near the top of the league at, get rebounds and go zoom right up the court on you, they were turning blocks and steals into instant points the other way. And that's why we didn't even have to talk about the half-court struggles throughout the majority of the regular season, because the Grizzlies still were one of the most effective offenses because they had DeAnthony Melton. They had Kyle Anderson. They had all these guys that could force turnovers. Jaren Jackson Jr. as well, defensive player of the year, first-team all-defense a couple years ago. They had these guys who just wreak havoc and cause this chaos defensively. But DeAnthony Melton and Kyle Anderson left, and then they had that other 50-win season, and they were still near the top of the NBA. Steals, blocks, stocks, transition scoring. That's because Jaren Jackson Jr. elevated to defensive player of the year. That's because you had, the development of a couple other key cogs in helping those statistical categories as well. Now you got Marcus Smart in the equation. And remember last season, we talked a lot about the idea of put 2 defensive players of the year in one starting lineup with Marcus Smart and Jaren Jackson Jr. Yeah, but it's the fact that they both wreak havoc. They're going to cause a lot of turnovers. We can sit here and talk a lot about the offensive. What does Marcus Smart bring offensively? I've had conversations with Celtics fans talk about his shot selection and he's going to take shots away from Ja and Dez and all that. All of that is TBD. We'll get to that. We'll discuss that when the time comes a little bit more. But as of right now, what we do know, we know Marcus Smart, and we saw it in a small sample size. Go look at that second game against the Pelicans after Ja Morant got back. Marcus Smart played in that game. Go look at the defensive force he was. He won them that game. Marcus Smart won that game. The second game after Ja got back against the Pelicans, not the first one, when he had the buzzer beater. Marcus Smart didn't play in that game. Go look at the second one. He won that game because of his ability to wreak havoc. That's the name of his game. That's what Marcus Smart will do for you. But thank you for making Locked On Grizzlies your first listen of the day. Your second listen should be to go over and enjoy the Locked On NBA podcast because there is no offseason in the NBA. And Locked On NBA provides daily basketball analysis from national and local experts, and you can get it in 30 minutes or less. No one keeps you as informed and entertained as the Locked On NBA, available on YouTube or wherever you get podcasts. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day. Coming up here next on Locked On Grizzlies, we got to talk about our guy G.G. Jackson. We haven't talked about G.G. Jackson in a little while. It's about time to talk about G.G. Jackson again, one of the young stars of the Memphis Grizzlies. But before we talk about that, we want to talk about you with one of our sponsors because this show is brought to you by BetterHelp. Listen up. When your schedule right now is packed, because we know school just started back and your schedule can be packed with all the kids' activities, right? You got to take them to school. You got the aftercare programs. Some kids dance, they play sports, they play instruments, whatever your kid is involved in. You got all these things going on and you got work. It's easy to let your main priority slip. And you can't forget your mental because that should be one of your main priorities because we know all these things. You see all these things that make you happy. But yourself, you got to find that inner self part that makes you happy as well. And how do you do that right now? Go over to BetterHelp. You should give BetterHelp a try because if you're thinking about starting therapy, BetterHelp is where you should go start. One, because it's entirely online. It's designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. No matter how busy your schedule is, it's online. You can lay in the bed while you're getting ready for bed at night, and you can do your BetterHelp then. All you got to do is fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist and switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. Again, fill out a brief questionnaire, and you'll get matched with a licensed therapist. And you can switch therapists at any time with BetterHelp. Make sure you go take advantage of that opportunity right now. You'll never skip therapy with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/LockedOnNBA today to get 10% off your first month. Again, that's BetterHelp, BetterHelp.com/LockedOnNBA to take advantage of that opportunity. Coming up here next on Locked On Grizzlies, we got to talk about G.G. Jackson. Make sure you stay tuned for that. Welcome back to Locked On Grizzlies, everyone. Recapping our show so far, we talked about the big three a little bit, Ja Morant, Desmond Bane, and Jaren Jackson. And in that segment, we pretty much focused on Desmond Bane and the underrated side of things. Me and Joe Mullinax have talked about that a little bit over the course of this offseason. Like Desmond Bane feels like a breakout year on a national scale could be coming for him. The breakout years already happened with the Grizzlies, but could come on a national scale. Then we have to talk about the impact of Marcus Smart. Some people said, I think G.G. Jackson should start. Some people said, I think Vince Williams should start. And I keep saying, ain't happening. Not while Marcus Smart is on this team right now. Not right now. Marcus Smart is going to be your starter alongside of Ja Morant, Desmond Bane. Accept it. It's cool. It's not the worst thing in the world. Marcus Smart has been on several teams that have won a lot of games. But let's talk about one of those two guys. Vince Williams, we've talked about him a decent amount. We'll talk about him a little bit more. But let's talk about G.G. Jackson. And this doesn't have anything to do with NBA 2K. We're done with the 2K rating stuff. But we want to talk about G.G. Jackson simply around the fact that the Grizzlies are planning on being one of those teams who are going to get together for informal workouts this offseason. I've said that before. Desmond Bane and the guys are planning on getting together. But we've seen some other teams, if you haven't kept up with it, the Houston Rockets recently, hosted some informal workouts together. There are some other teams that are planning to do the same thing. It's simply just players coming together, meeting up in a central location on a team and saying, hey, we're going to meet up, we're going to play, you're going to get some running. The Grizzlies somewhat did it last offseason, even though they have a couple guys like Derrick Rose, for example. Derrick Rose does not do 5-on-5 basketball in the offseason. It's a maintenance thing for him, keep his body as fresh as possible for the season. But when he joined the Grizzlies, He decided to do it. I don't know if he's going to do it this offseason, but his first year with the Grizzlies, he said, hey, I'm new to the team. I'm going to join the guys, and I'm going to do it. All of this that I'm saying right now is going to come back to G.G. Jackson because with the Grizzlies getting together early, we just talked about how, with Ja and Zach Edey working out early, how beneficial that could be. Here's my thoughts. I think the Grizzlies getting together early. And when I say getting together early, we know training camp for the Grizzlies starts October 1st. October 1st is when the Grizzlies will enter training camp in Nashville at Innsworth School. But before that, long before that, you got a month where guys are going to be ramping up a little bit, kind of preparing themselves for training camp. And players and teammates are going to get together. As important as it was to see Zach Edey and Ja get together, it's probably the most important. I'll say this. G.G. Jackson is probably the next important reason why the Grizzlies should get together early. He's the next important reason. Here's why. If you look at G.G. Jackson, has all the talent in the world, right? I like the fact that he's a 6'9" guy with the wiggle that he has. Like, it's some Paul George type movement in that guy. But with all that being said, I've said this a couple times before to everydayers. You've heard this before. If you get real picky about Gigi's game, like you can point out the fact, man, second round pick as a rookie, he made second team all rookie. He averaged over 14 points per game. If you get real picky about G.G. Jackson's game, you're going to come to the realization. This is fact, not opinion. His efficiency is not there yet. His usage was very high for a rookie who started the season in the G League and kind of got, for lack of better words, rushed into this opportunity to play with the Memphis Grizzlies. So when you throw all that in there and you factor all that in, here's the conclusion. G.G. Jackson, starting the offseason early, getting them play with Ja Morant, Desmond Bane, Jaren Jackson Jr., and the rest of the guys, he stands to benefit more than anyone on the team. The Ja and Zach Edey dynamic is most beneficial for the Grizzlies from a team concept, but from an individual, this is what my role is going to be. Okay, I can change my game a little bit. G.G. Jackson stands to benefit more than anyone. G.G. Jackson, the way he played last season with the Grizzlies, like the style of play, all having the ball in his hands as much as he did, a lot of isolations, things like that. It's not really going to fly with when Ja Morant, Desmond Bane, and Jaren Jackson Jr. is on the floor. Now, don't get me wrong, Gigi's going to get his shots because Gigi makes a lot of shots. He's going to get his opportunities. But I'm going to ask you this question, and I know what your answer is going to be, so it's kind of a rhetorical question. But when you saw G.G. Jackson taking all those transition pull-up threes and, some contested shots mixed in there, and he would miss them, you're like, G.G., get the next one last season. But this season, when it's a 2-point game in the third quarter and you're holding off the Denver Nuggets and you're on the road and Ja Morant's on the floor, Desmond Bane has 22 points and has already made 4 3-pointers, Jaren Jackson Jr. is dominating in the paint, and G.G. Jackson comes up in transition, I'm feeling it. And he pulls that transition 3, and you're like, no, G.G., why'd you shoot that? It's going to feel a little bit different than it did last season, right? I think so. Last season, man, you didn't really care if they won or lost towards the end of the season. Like, G.G. Jackson, get those shots up. It's a little bit different this year. So I say all that to say that this offseason program, allowing G.G. to play alongside of Ja, Dez, and Jaren, put him in a lineup with those guys. Not necessarily a starting lineup, but in a grouping with those guys so he can learn how to, get my catch and shoot opportunities here, catch, dribble, drive, kick it out to guys, because that's another developmental part. Remember, G.G. Jackson last year didn't even average 1 assist. So he's going to have to get to the point where he's able to, kick it to this guy, kick it to that guy. That's going to be the developmental point. I think he averaged 1.2 assists. He didn't average 2 assists. But the playmaking aspect of it and playing alongside of, quite frankly, extremely talented NBA scorers is going to be the next developmental stage for G.G. Jackson. That's going to determine how much he plays with the Grizzlies this season. And I think it's better if he gets to work on that with those guys before training camp gets here, because when training camp gets here, of course, you're going to have that week, which the Grizzlies typically have, where they're going to be ramping up, and he's going to get the opportunities to learn that stuff. But I feel like you should want to impress the coaches. Because right now, I don't know if G.G. Jackson's in the rotation. Y'all have heard me say it. I know some people are like, what, DeMichael? I'm not going to do the whole breakdown thing because there it is. You've already heard me say it a bunch of times. But if you just go do the numbers, look at the potential starting lineup for the Grizzlies with Martin Smart in it, like I just said, and then look at the guys on the bench. The Grizzlies like to play 9. Remember that. They'll start the season playing 10, but they like to play 9. Do the math. It's slim pickings around here right now. But with all that being said, I think that G.G. Jackson stands to benefit more than anyone from the fact that the Grizzlies are getting together early. So I'm looking forward to hearing about that. And once I hear some things, of course, we'll follow up here on Locked On Grizzlies and keep you guys posted with that information as well. Thank you again for making Locked On Grizzlies your first listen today. Now go check out the Locked On NBA podcast, where the season never ends, provide national expertise with a local perspective. So you can find the link to the Locked On NBA podcast in the description here. So you don't need to go search for it. It's in description of this podcast. So it's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day. Thank you guys for tuning in to Locked On Grizzlies on today. Make sure you continue to tune in to Locked On Grizzlies. Until next time, where me and Joe Mullinax will be back with you on Monday. Locked On Grizzlies, free and available wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Damichael Cole, and we'll see you next time on Monday on Locked On Grizzlies.